Today's video is an interview with Chad Willardson. He's the president and the founder of Pacific Capital in California. He's a certified financial fiduciary and then a chartered retirement planning counselor. And then a few other letters are after his name. But the main thing is he's got a lot of experience in helping people live their ideal retirement. And if you're seeing this on YouTube, look for the bookmarks below so you can skip around to areas that might interest you the most. But some of the topics we talk about is the difference between some retirees who have done it well, retired well, and then those who struggle. And then he shares a little bit on retirees that have had continually grown their purpose and their significance in retirement, and a story about a person who's done that. And then he shares a bit on how to pass values on to your kids and your grandkids, because the money part is important, but also some of the values and learnings and things that we have, the wisdom, is even more important. I really enjoyed this interview, and I believe you will too, so let's get into it. Chad, a lot of the viewers that are getting close to retirement or already retired, they're focusing most of their time on that planning for that retirement, right? So you've been helping people for a long time get to this place of, call it retirement or financial independence or time freedom. And when you're looking back over your career, are there any big differences that you see between people who were successful in retirement and then those who struggled a little bit?
Yes, that's a great question, Dave. I would say those who are successful really focus on the cash flow, and that's their main focus. I think those who are unsuccessful often focus on like a lump sum number. Maybe they're thinking like, well, if I can get to 1 million or I can get to 3 million or whatever the number might be, they over focus on some arbitrary value of assets. And they feel that once they hit that number that they can retire. Those who are really successful about it are more looking at the cash flow. They're looking at their cash flow planning, their budgeting, income from investments, passive income, real estate income, and they have a handle on what they're going to spend and what they can earn. I would say one other trait of the unsuccessful is that they get caught up with whatever is happening in the news, and they often will shift their investment strategy based on the scary news headlines. And sometimes that will cause a very permanent outcome in what they do with their money, which then leads to a much lower cash flow, which then causes a real harm to their lifestyle spending opportunities. So I think it really comes down to what do you focus on as you're preparing for or as you're entering into retirement? Like, what's your focus and where do you put all your energy? Is it in just an arbitrary number, or is it in the cash flow planning? Is it in what's the latest and greatest place to put money today, but it might compromise your lifestyle later? So I think there are a lot of factors that go into successful retirement.
So that news, what you mentioned about news and just getting, they do great at what they do, right? Which is get your attention and keep you glued to the TV or get you worried, especially when people get to the stage now of being getting close to being done with their actual work income or career income. And now they got to shift that mindset to now using the things that they've saved. Even people with a lot, we've seen it's an adjustment, right? Sometimes it's hard to start spending and following that plan. And then all of these things happening, looking back at just the beginning of last year where war was breaking out, inflation, and all these things were hitting us just one after the other.
Scary.
Any practical advice on that, staying focused and keeping your energy on the things that you can control and not getting too swayed or too, not wanting to shift that strategy? What do you tell people when they're worried about things going on in the world?
I really try to help them focus, like you said, Dave, on what's within their control, which is their spending commitments, their memberships, their subscriptions. It's a little bit scary for people to go off the payroll in a sense and become retirees and just live off your assets or your passive income. That's a big jump. They're used to getting a paycheck and going to work. And now it's like this scary feeling, and they're constantly asking themselves one question. And that question is, do I have enough? And I think that's the question that will perpetually be in their minds, causing anxiety and stress until they've gone through some very thorough planning to test, do they have enough? And so the question is, do you have enough? Well, let's look at the cash flow. Let's look at your expenses. Let's look at your taxes. How much income can you rely on? And then how do you avoid making big mistakes and being reactionary to what's happening out there in the world? We certainly don't discount the big concerns, the wars, the inflation, the interest rates changing, housing market, the depression or recession that maybe is looming in the background. These are real concerns, but they're outside of your control. So as you're looking at your own retirement plan, you've got to really focus on things that you can make changes in. And that's why I strongly suggest that you find a professional to work with that can give you good counsel, that you align with, that specializes in people like you. Like most people are not a fit to be my client, and that's okay. And maybe there's another advisor or financial fiduciary that's great, that's in your area, that's a perfect fit. And I think that's important. Like sometimes in our industry, we get caught up in over promoting what we do when really there's a lot of great professionals. We shouldn't be overselling, trying to persuade someone to get advice from us. I don't think it's one size fits all. There are a lot of great advisors out there. And I think there's more than one way to plan a successful retirement. But at the core of all of it are your specific goals, your personal lifestyle needs, and making long-term thoughtful decisions that you consider what's in your control, what can you change, and maybe how to prepare for what's ahead. You can't predict it, but you can certainly prepare for it.
That's good. What do you think? So we're talking mostly about the number side right now, but then there's this whole other non-number side to retirement, right? Around purpose and meaning and passion. What are some strategies for retirees to just maintain and even grow that sense of purpose in retirement when they're no longer working?
It's a great question, Dave. I think you bring up a very important point, which is you've got to retire to something. It's not just retire from something. You're still, Dan Sullivan, our shared mentor and coach, who's amazing, talks about gaining freedom from and what are you gaining freedom towards or to. So really, as you retire, you've got to have a game plan of what you're going to do. That's something I told my parents. My dad retired in his early 60s, and before he did, I basically kind of made him write out a list. Things that you're excited about, new hobbies you're going to pick up on. How are you going to stay actively engaged in the business world? He initially served on a couple boards and did some consulting, and that just kept him in the loop of what's happening in the industry without having much of a work schedule. So my practical tips for that is really to map out a plan. Do not just cut the cord and jump. You've got to have a literal game plan of what you're going to do in retirement, because it could be a third of your life. Can you imagine just aimlessly waiting to die for 20 to 30 years? It just doesn't make sense to me. And yet the old days, it was like people would retire at 65. They'd sit on their porch in the rocking chair, smoke a cigar, read the newspaper, and not do much of anything. But today's retirees are very different. They're active, they're healthy, they're living longer. They've got purpose. They're working in nonprofits. I would love to see each of our retirees mentor somebody, even if it's in the family, like mentor a child or grandchild, a niece or nephew, mentor a young business associate. Use your wisdom and your experience to do something creative and good. There's a lot that can be done beyond your full-time career when that's up. And unfortunately, what I've seen is people retire with no purpose, and they end up having a lot of health issues. They've kind of lost their identity and their purpose. They don't have a reason to wake up. They feel a little bit lost. You can only play so much golf. And I just think it's important that you have a plan for what you really want to be engaged in and have a purpose. The Simon Sinek's book, Start With Why. You've got to have something you're going for.
Can you think of any clients of yours, just a story or an example or anecdote of someone who kind of did it right, where they either sold their business or were done with their career, and then something else came into their purview that took up their passion or purpose?
Yes, I have a client named Casey, and he sold his business to a public company. It was a very significant transaction, and he had been working 80 to 100-hour weeks. This was a close to $1 billion sale. And he has done so many cool things since that sale. He stayed on for a little bit and worked as required by the public company that acquired him. But he has gotten involved in consulting and advisory boards and investing in companies where he can have a seat at the board and have a seat at the table and give direct mentorship and advice and guidance to the entrepreneur founder that he's investing in. And that's something he loves to do. It doesn't require many hours a month, but it utilizes his experience. And as he says, he gets to put his thumb on the scale of a business he's excited about without the day-to-day headache of operations. He got involved in a charity with his children that's doing a lot of great work in Africa. So he just got back from Kenya, doing an incredible service trip over there in Africa. He's involved in a bunch of charities locally. And I think he's just taken the time to really decompress from all that business that he was so tied up in while still staying engaged. He said as soon as he settled down, he realized how many opportunities were in front of him. There were a lot of people calling him saying, "Hey, we'd love to get you involved in this." And so he's being selective, but I love to see what he's doing, staying engaged in entrepreneurship and mentorship and really putting his money to good use in the charitable efforts of his family. So it's exciting.
Interesting. That's super exciting. Thanks for sharing that. I'm going to switch topics a little bit, still focused on people getting close to or in retirement. But you wrote this great book called Smart Not Spoiled, right? That's the title. What's the rest of the title?
The 7 money skills kids must master before leaving the nest.
So now thinking still of people who are in their 50s or 60s, one of the chapters, I think maybe the last chapter is in generosity. It's on generosity.
Yep.
Do you have any advice for parents or grandparents on how they can pass on that value of generosity to heirs? And why is that important? Why is that a focus that they should think about?
The more people I speak with, the more I realize there's a lot to be passed on and inherited beyond financial assets. And people really do care about passing on a legacy of values and principles and stories. A lot of times they want to pass down family stories. And so generosity is a mantra that many people would love to build as a foundation in their family. And I think that to be successful and to have an abundant mindset is to be generous and to not believe that money is scarce and that opportunity is a zero-sum game. So if you've got an abundance mindset and you're generous, why not teach that to the next generation? If you're listening to this podcast about financial success and retirement planning, you're probably in the 1% of the world at the very top. So you have a lot of abundance and blessings that you can share with others. So teaching that to the next generation and even the grandkids, I think, is not just an opportunity, but an obligation. Whether that's starting a charitable foundation, whether it's doing something simple like asking your kids and grandkids, what causes do we care about as a family? What can we give money to? More importantly, what can we give time and service to? So in that chapter, I share some specific examples of my wife and I doing some cool things with our kids, even on travel visits where we're looking for ways to serve and make a difference and be generous. I think that's something that we all have the opportunity, like I said, but also the obligation to do. So think about ways of creating a legacy plan for your family in retirement. What could I do and utilize my abundance of time and money and resources to really leave a lasting impact on the next generation? It's a question we really should all be asking ourselves, regardless of how old we are.
Oh, I love that. Love it. Chad, one other question around retirement, mainly focused on, I'd say, a business owner or entrepreneur who kind of have a different, they have a different freedom, I guess, in how they're going to use their time, right? There's this concept of retiring in your business, focusing on the things that you love doing, that you're good at, and really move the needle. Do you ever recommend not retiring, even if someone has the financial means to and has the ability to? Do you ever recommend not doing so?
Yes, I do. I'm a pretty open book, Dave. My wife and I could have financially hung up the sneakers a long time ago, and yet I love what I do, and I'm doing way less of the things I don't love to do. And so why would I leave that? As Dan Sullivan says, people don't retire from freedom and enjoyment. So I think there's a place for that. You can certainly set up your business as a business owner. You can set it up in a way to where you're focused on the very few activities that really give you energy and you can provide a lot of impact and value in, and have great team members handle the rest. As we're having this interview right now, my team is having meetings with clients in the conference room right next to us. That's something that they're great at, that gives them energy. They dig into the financial planning details. And I'd rather be doing things like this, talking on TV and talking on the news and podcasts and sharing ideas and brainstorming with other entrepreneurs and experts. That's something that gives me energy. So I certainly think there's a place for no retirement, where retirement is dead. I think retirement can be seen somewhat as in an old school way, where it's, if you worked in an industry factory for 40 years, your back's going to give out, your neck's going to give out. You're not going to be able to last much longer. So it's like, how quickly can I be done with this labor that drains me? But if you have that fortunate opportunity to be a successful entrepreneur and design and create your lifestyle and schedule, there's great opportunities to stay engaged without selling your company or without completely shutting it down. That's certainly something that interests me, that I'm enjoying right now. We're building the team, we're hiring, we're growing. I'm not doing this just for myself or because I need to earn more money to pay the bills. It's because I really love what I do.
Yeah. Wow. So you're the case study.
Yes.
For that example. I love that. Chad, anything that I did not ask that I should have related to people getting close to or in retirement?
It's a great question. I think you ask very intelligent, thoughtful questions, Dave. I don't know that you missed anything. We could probably talk about this topic together for days, but you hit a lot of the great points. I would say this is that one caution for those preparing for retirement is beware of information overload. I think just like maybe fad diets, there's a lot of fad retirement diets. There's advice, financial advice, that are rules of thumb that aren't true. There's a lot of myths out there. Unfortunately or fortunately, there's so much information at our fingertips. So you really could just take the fire hose in the face and never know what's accurate, what's good information, and what's not. And I would just caution people to beware of making significant financial decisions without good counsel. I think there's a lot of value in getting multiple opinions before you make any big decisions.
Excellent. Chad, thank you for the time today. Thank you for sharing some of your wisdom and advice with all your experience. It's really valuable, and I appreciate you coming on.
Thank you for having me.